So Wendy McIntyre, human resources consultant, owner, consultant, Resolve HR. I'm doing a thing for PBWA, the PEI Business Women's Association, on Friday. And I saw they put me as co-owner and co-founder. I'm like, oh, who are my other co's? I don't know who they are. So it's just me. Although, interestingly enough, I am in the process of hiring my first employee, which I was swearing since I started that I would never do. Thank you, thank you. I swore I would never do because I know what HR is about. And I know what it's like to have employees, and that's why I didn't want any. But I'm doing that, and I've never done payroll before. I've never done that sort of transactional payroll benefits stuff. I advise on it, but I don't actually do the transactions for it. So that's something new that I'll be doing too, that I'm really looking forward to. And what an opportune time to do it when I won't get to see the person or give them paper to do stuff, but instead, starting them off virtually, which is actually going to work out great because I work from home anyway. I have my office in my house. So I'm quite used to this, but I know a lot of people aren't. And I'm naturally an introvert, although I express extrovertedly, but my introvert self is quite content. But I know there's a lot of people who are going bananas, just needing to be around people. Okay, we've got one on the line. Yeah, it's really, really hard.
I was going to ask, if you don't mind, I'm sorry to interrupt.
I love it. Bring it up.
So you actually cut out when you were talking about yourself. So I know the sessions on working from home, and you talked about being a part of HR, but what do you do now? Because I miss that.
Okay. Great question. We're off to a good start. So what my business does is I'm a business-to-business consultant. And I work with employers in small to medium-sized businesses, not-for-profits, and startups. And what I do is I help clients with everything from figuring out what kinds of skills they need for their first employees and how to go about hiring people, to how to say goodbye to somebody without having it come back to bite you. And I do a lot of workshops and facilitation. Training for managers. And so, workplace investigations, training managers, one-on-one kind of small C coaching on how to deal with employees.
And what's your company called again?
Resolve HR. Yeah. And if you want to be really particular about it, it's a small R, all one word, capital H, capital R.
Okay, I can Google search.
I also get HR Resolve and different versions. But yeah, that's me.ca. So I've been consulting I'm in my 5th year of business on my own, but I was consulting for probably 5 years before that. I've been in HR for about 20.
God love you.
Pardon me?
I said God love you.
I love what I do. Love what I do. So I'm very fortunate that way. So some of the things that have been happening, and I'll give you a little intro. Peter McDougall, who's on this call, is a very experienced HR professional, director of HR for UNB for many years. He's working his way into retirement and farming.
Mostly retirement.
Who was Peter McDougall?
Yeah. So today what I've been doing with my calls with different employers is finding out, what are people facing? What are they dealing with? What are some of the best practices coming out of the pandemic, having to deal with things differently? And what can we learn from? And now we're talking about restarting the economy with our phased-in program for PEI and what that's going to look like. So I think I might actually start from there because there's a big part of it for the workplace that's been it's getting more and more attention, and it's coming more and more forward. And right now, it's a great time for these conversations. They're starting to happen about mental health in the workplace. One in particular is around psychological safety in the workplace. And, coming up, there's the new legislation coming out under the Occupational Health and Safety Act that is specific to, it's always been there about sexual harassment, but now it's coming out to be including bullying in the workplace, more or less. It's still considered harassment under the terminology, but it's bullying. And where, PEI is actually leading the way on some things in this respect. So when I think about people starting to go back to work, well, people working from home, when you have somebody working from home, some people are doing really well, like I said, and some people are working an incredible amount of hours. They're just head down, churning out the work because that's their bliss, is to be uninterrupted, sitting at a desk. Hopefully they have a desk, and just going through the work and not being interrupted by other people, which they consider socializing to be an interruption, right? Then there's other people that they feed off of their coworkers. So they get productive because they're talking to people, they're getting more ideas, they're learning, they're peer-to-peer learning, and that gives them the energy to do the work. So their productivity has been much lower because they're needing all these other distractions that help fill their bucket. So there's definitely, when we start to look at going back to work, we also have to think about, okay, well, what do we need to consider for psychological safety? Something that I'm concerned about with people coming back to work is that some folks may have, maybe you've driven by your coworker's place and they've always had extra cars, different cars in the driveway. And they've noticed and they're like, they're not following the rules. They've had people over. I know those people don't live there. I think there's going to be some anger in some people looking at who's coming back to work. And I think there's going to be some relationships that need some fixing up. So that's one thing that I think we're going to have to talk to each other about and say to our staff and to ourselves, we're coming back to the other side of this, or starting to get to, we're at the end of the first phase of COVID-19. So as we start to adjust back, to be open to think, okay, there are some people with different styles, different motivations. So did they need to be around people? Did they have just a real psychological need to see people around, to talk to other people? Because maybe that's the best they could do, was to have somebody over now and again to talk to. And maybe that was what kept them mentally sane during this time. And if we weren't those people, yes, Tracy Lane?
No, go, you finish what you're saying and then I'll ask.
Okay. So maybe there's some people that they did really well at isolating, not having other people around, doing everything, at a distance, virtually. And those people could have a sense of, they could have they can feel really proud of themselves for being able to do that, but they could also have a little bit of self-righteousness about it and comparing to other people who couldn't do that. So we have to be a little bit open-minded about looking at, what does everybody need? And I know I need this, but what did somebody else need? Not everybody's the same as I am. So, yeah.
So if you don't mind me asking now, so you're talking about this the psychological safety, which I think is fantastic. And I'm so happy you're talking about this, because in a diverse work group, when going back in, there is going to be a lot of challenges. So with these concerns that you have, do you feel it'd be best to, have a very informal staff gathering and talk about the Renew PEI and what it's going to look like in the office and address these on a very minute basis? Or is it better to kind of go back in status quo and only address as you need? What is the best practice for this at this point?
Your first suggestion, your first option is the one I'd go with. And we're not coming all back into the workplace at once, nor should we. There should be a phased reintroduction and reconfiguration of the office space to make sure that people have space, cleaning protocols. And I think for that, what we should be doing is discussing what that's going to look like before we go back to the workplace, even on a staggered basis. Like maybe there's some people that you need to look at. Okay, do you work well from home? Do you have children you still need to take care of? Like, what are the needs of each individual employee? And then to come up with a plan together so that everyone can have a bit of an understanding to what their coworkers' needs are and how to best accommodate people without feeling like it's sort of a legislative or a legal accommodation, but instead be open-minded about what are my coworkers' needs, what's going to be safe. There's going to be a lot of people that won't want to return to work. They won't want to go back to the workplace, I should say, because there's a friend of mine, she started calling it worry leave that people were taking. So, but it's this fear. And because we've been isolating ourselves so much that they could have anxiety about going back to work. So how do we include those folks so that they don't have so much worry? And we have to stay in touch with them, because if we're not in touch with them, they get more distanced and more anxious usually, because there's a bigger barrier to going back to the workplace. So I highly recommend having discussions. Maybe you have a list of the questions that you want to ask your staff and have a discussion around it virtually. What will this look like? What are your needs? How do we small a accommodate these needs, and who can do what? And if you keep it open, people should be willing to, and you keep that kind of discussion, not just a like, boom, we're going to set this out on paper right now, but instead these little conversations. Were you going to say something?
Once we phase back into the office, pardon? Can you hear me?
Yeah. Yep.
Okay. So once we phase back into being in the office and we've taken into consideration people's needs, you had mentioned that some staff may be angry because other staff didn't follow the rules, the drive-by and seeing the cars there, and there may be some negative mindsets or a little bit of resentment. Would it be beneficial? And I guess I very much could have asked this question very specifically the way I am now. Would it be beneficial to have an informal staff meeting to talk about these things and around different people's needs and things like that? Or is it better to just let people handle those on their own? Like, what's the best practice for that? Because you don't want people coming back in angry or stereotyping other people and holding that resentment. But at the same time, when you're working in an environment setting, especially in office, and it's supposed to be respectful and it's supposed to be professional, how can you kind of make sure everybody's coming back very cohesive, very ready to work without the resentment, but maybe not making that resentment or that anger predominant in the workplace? Because you don't want to call anybody out, but at the same time, you want to make sure that everybody feels respected and safe and heard. So is it better to have individual conversations or a staff meeting, or like, what do you feel would be the best practice for that so that this doesn't happen or doesn't linger behind the scenes?
Yes, because that's exactly, if it's behind the scenes, it's going to come out in other places. So if you know of some people that they do have specific feelings or there's certain people involved, definitely talk to them individually. One of the things that I really can't stand seeing, but it happens all the time, and I'm sure I've done it, blanket statements. So to go into a staff meeting and say, okay, everybody needs to do X, Y, Z. And everybody knows it's only Carrie that's doing that. So now the others resent the employer for saying something. They resent Carrie because now we're all having to wear this. And it will fester behind the scenes as well. And probably Carrie, maybe she feels awful because now she's been called out in front of everybody. Or maybe she's oblivious, right? So when you're looking at repairing some relationships, it's so important to do that one-on-one with people to find out what's going on behind the scenes. What am I missing? Tell me what's going on for you. And if there is resentment and you find that out, then you can say, well, what would make that better? How could that be fixed? Like what's your plan to help you get past this? Because I know you don't want to be resentful towards someone. I know you want to be a positive employee and coworker. So, and then how can I help you facilitate that? Is there something I can help you with? So it's really about sort of setting the stage, getting people to open up a little bit one-on-one, and then, maybe you can bring it to the group as something that's, let's all work on trust in the workplace. Trust is huge. And we're having to figure out how to manage trust, how to build trust, how to keep trust in a very different environment than what it was before. And that will continue because it's not going to be the same as it was before the pandemic. Nothing's ever going to be the same as it was before the pandemic. But what does that look like going forward? We don't know exactly yet either. And that's the other thing, is to show that, I don't have all the answers. I don't know exactly how things are going to roll out, but sort of let's play this out together. Let's have some ideas together as to what that might look like and how we can manage a staggered back to work plan, or what we might do to say, this is going to be our cleaning protocol. What can we all agree to? What will meet the requirements? Those are really important things to have discussions about and have your employees contribute to that discussion. Any other questions or comments out there? Did people see the return to work? The province put it out on May 2nd, COVID-19 operational plan template. So they have a template that they posted. You just download it. I'll do a screen share. So it's really great. I was starting to get questions from people. How do we know how far apart people have to sit, and how do we know what to put in place? And they were excellent questions, and the province was working on helping us figure some of that stuff out. So it's just a template that you can fill in as an employer or even as an employee, and you want to bring it forward to your manager or your employer. So what are some of the steps that we need to take to make sure there's minimal interaction with people? So between clients, between employees and clients, exclusion of employees requiring self-employment, or self-isolation rather, illness, cleaning, hand washing. If nothing else comes out of this, my gosh, I'm so glad people are learning how to wash their hands properly. We should have much less flu overall, hopefully with this too. But I think by having some of these things, if we think through them ahead of time, and then we put it out there as this is what we're going to follow, it makes it a tool that then we can rely on rather than necessarily judging people individually, because we will judge. We judge people all the time. So this kind of gives us a tool to make it more objective. Rather than, well, I think this, I think that. But if they're contributing to this, and then you post it or you send it out to everybody, get agreement from everybody, then you can say, okay, well, this is what we're going to use going forward. This is good stuff. This is what we're going to try to abide by. We all agreed. So what else is going on?
Hey, Wendy, I saw that. It's funny because as a co-working space, we're somewhat of a unique situation. Some of the questions we've been asking have been around, it's almost like doing your homework or like pre-work to fill in those things out. So like, where have you been? And like, who have you been in interactions with, right? And so, I don't know, it's interesting. We have to be careful. It's like, okay, a lot of our companies have not been out of province, but they might have interacted with someone who was out of province. And so where do you draw that line? And, do we put them in a certain area of our co-working space, right? The COVID area or something.
Outside, yeah.
So that's been really interesting to see. It reminds us of like that livestock question you answer when you're going into another country. It's like, have you been in interactions with other human beings outside the province? So it's just interesting to see the importance of like local that's going to come out of this, I think.
Yes.
And like being Atlantic Canadian, it's like, oh, okay, cool, you're Atlantic Canadian, you're allowed in the province, but oh, wait a sec, you're from Toronto, like red flags or out of country.
Yeah.
So I think that'll be super interesting.
It
to see as
is.
it-
Like PEI, we are in such a unique position. We're an island. We can say, yes, you can come in. No, you can't. Like, it's pretty phenomenal. We pay our dues year round with our winters and stuff, but right now it's we've earned this, I think.
Yeah.
But I do see, people going back to work. One of the things they have to feel safe about going back to work, and that's under the Occupational Health and Safety Act requires you to provide a safe and healthy work environment. So what does that actually mean? And I expect to see a lot less cubicles. I expect to see offices changing the way they're laid out. You have a lot of places that have these open concepts where they pack in as many people as possible. And then they say, everybody's collaborating. It's for creative thinking. It's to, for synergy. That can be true, but not everybody works that way. And we still need some space to think. A lot of people need space to think that's separate and quiet. So with coming back to work, what does that mean for people? What is it going to look like? Do we space our desks out differently? What about lunchrooms? Who can go to the lunchroom? Can you only have one or two people at a time? Do you have to wear gloves? Do you have to sanitize everything all the time? What about bathrooms? There was somebody on a Facebook group yesterday asking, we have washrooms that are open to the public. Should we open them or not? So if I'm working in a place and the bathroom's open to the public, do I necessarily feel safe in my workplace knowing that somebody's just left a washroom and I'm going in? Like, do I go in bubble wrap? I don't know. So that's about the safety and who's going to come back to work when they may not feel safe.
It reminds me of like the gyms when you go to use like a piece of equipment. You've got the sanitizer, you've got the reg, and so like all of our offices, all our breakout rooms are going to be set up like a gym sort of. We're calling them sanitation stations.
Ooh, I like that.
I'm surprised it hasn't caught on yet. That was our intern.
After today.
And so like you got your paper towel, and it's it's not cheap, but for an extra $10 or something, I think it's worth the preventative measures. And so ideally when you're leaving, you're cleaning up, but also when you're arriving, you have the option to clean up too. So it kind of gives you that peace of mind to control that.
Well, I even think, you have a dishwasher there. Who's unloading it?
Right, yeah.
I mean, it's something is you've got clean dishes until somebody touches them, maybe.
Yeah.
Right. So, and the other thing too, when you have all this paper towel out and you have all this PPE, the environmental impact it's minimal compared to other things that we do as humans. But in my mind, I'm just thinking, okay, well, how much disposable stuff are we doing now, right? What does that mean? Or do we take everything from home and then take it back home at the end of the day? And it's going to be like, how do we have to think about these things? I think we have to be really careful and over the top with thinking about it all and doing things, but
it's fun. We get a kick out of it because it's very entrepreneurial in some ways, and you're predicting plan A to Z, and M will happen. And I mean, it's not always fun, but that's how we're trying to look at it, I guess, is try to have fun with it.
With your sanitation stations.
Exactly, yeah. Whatever you can get.
Wherever, there's a lot of silver linings. We just have to look for them.
Wendy, I think another thing that organizations, employers, managers are going to need to be mindful of is, not only, of course, it's just generally a stressful time, obviously, but how different people are going to respond differently to the measures that are being taken and the decisions that are being made. So, when you hear the premier or the Dr. Morrison talk, some people think we should open now, some people think we should, so there's the real risk. So I'm just thinking of Patrick, what you're saying. So I'm imagining a workplace and people come back to work, and now all of a sudden, you're telling me I got to wear a mask, or you're telling me I got to do this, you guys tell me I'm doing that. There's probably going to be, half the people or more who are frustrated by the measures that are being imposed on them. And I think that's something the business is going to have to manage as well too. I really think this conversation has led me to realize I think it's really important for businesses, if you have the means and the ability, to have a one-on-one with every single person and just gauge where they're at, talk about, what things are going to look for them moving forward, talk about what concerns they have, everybody's dealing with different things. So figure out what's going on in their life, what needs they have, what concerns they have, and make sure to come up with as customized a plan as you can for each individual person.
Agreed. And, on PEI, we're very fortunate because most of our businesses are small to medium sized. So you can have the opportunity to speak to people, and you need to make sure that they know you're listening. You're not just going through check boxes, because I think a lot of times that's what people will be thinking is, okay, I just have to check off the box. I have to show that I'm caring. Yep, check. Thank them, check. But to do that really authentically is going to be important. And I think that's a great suggestion. Talk to everybody one-on-one, because you don't know, maybe somebody that they live with has an underlying health condition, but another employee sees, well, they don't want to come back to work because they're on the serve, so they're just lazy and staying home. No. We don't know what people are going through. Yeah.
Wendy, I have a question, and I don't have a staff, obviously, but I've just been talking to some people, and it seems to be an issue about, so it's less about the CERB and more about, I think, people that are just working from home now, and they're starting to get integrated back into offices. And some people, like they really want to get out of their house and they're really excited to go back. And obviously there's other people that are like, I'm not comfortable with that right now. And how you kind of approach that in a way that, you're working with everyone. Because I think some people are going to be unhappy, and obviously there's gossip and stories always. But some people are going to be unhappy, well, this guy still gets to work from home, but maybe I'm not working from home or whatever. And I know obviously communication is the biggest thing, but are there anything that you would recommend people doing? Or is there a point where they say, I don't want people working from home forever, so should I set clear guidelines that by a certain date we all have to be back? I don't know.
I think that's a great idea. And even though, so I was just on the phone with a friend of mine who they've decided in their church, they've decided we're just going to put a date on it that this is when we're going to resume. So they're looking at September. So until then, let's not stress about thinking, am I going to be called back to work tomorrow? When is it going to happen? I don't know. People will get worked up over that, just not knowing, right? So to set a date, and the other part you said, having to deal with people who are judging others and rumors and all of those great things that go along, especially with a small community. So how do we manage that? So I like the idea of, having a joint document where people can list off, and it kind of crosses into privacy a little bit, but we also have to understand that we need to be a little bit vulnerable right now because of the situation. So how do we do that? By saying, these are my needs. I have somebody at home that I have to stay. I can't get sick because I take care of this person, or what have you. So to be able to identify what are some of the accommodations that you need as an employee, and then share that at least with your employer, if not the group. So I really like the idea of having some sort of a document like the COVID operational plan template that the province put out to say, And you can have another one to say, this is what the matrix of our employee complement looks like. So these people are going to come back first, or these people are going to come back on Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday. Those people are going to be Thursday, Friday, to stagger it out. People also have to have a feeling that they control something. So maybe that something is determining, what desk they use. Not really. Never mind. Scratch that. But it could be deciding what day they come back on, or, what are the things that I can do at home that I will do better at home working on than if I were in a workplace. It is going to come to the point where employers are going to be saying, no, you have to come back to work now. We're done. Come back to work, the workplace. And you're going to have people that will argue, you know what? No, I proved that I can work from home. I proved that I'm productive. I proved X, Y, Z. And that's one thing with my clients, I've been saying, don't write a policy about work from home. Do not make it a policy. Make it a memo. Make it a temporary thing. But once you create a policy, it's hard to take back. So instead, how do you wean people off of working from home? If you need them to be in the office, that can be a requirement. It is what it is. But it's definitely to figure out what people's needs are and how to address them. And then it may be a matter of, just like before the pandemic, what is an accommodation? What's reasonable for a requested accommodation, which gets into much more formal areas. But you can look at it as they don't want to come back because they've got an underlying health condition. Well, maybe if you force them back, that could be a claim of discrimination based on physical ability. Who knows? I feel like have I circled around the question, or have I answered it too?
No, I think you have. I think my biggest thing is, I think what I see coming is the people that are going to say, I don't want to work in the office anymore. And I know there's a lot of employers that are not necessarily on board the work from home. I mean, I know there's a lot that are, and if you want to work from home part-time, that's fine. But there's a lot of industries that you don't necessarily have to be in the office, but they want you in the office. So I think there's going to be a big struggle with okay, we accommodated you and that was a requirement and that's okay. But at some point, everybody has to come back, and when you're going to pull them back, right?
And start having those discussions now so people understand you're going to have to go back to the workplace, because that is exactly what you should, as an employer, that's your prerogative. Where do you want them to work? Not everybody should work from home. Not everybody has the ability to work from home. They might think they do, but they don't sometimes, right? So you have to be able to say, I'm your manager, I'm your employer. This is what I require. If you can't do it, maybe you need to find another place to work. That's the harshest side of it, right?
Wendy, don't you think, because I'm hearing you say this and I'm thinking, I don't know about that. The world has changed. There is no pre-COVID anymore, right? So we're never going back there. So yeah. Don't you think, I would think that companies should be really starting to evaluate whether in fact they do need people to come into the office. And if they start pushing people to come in when there isn't necessarily a true need, and if they're not going to be receptive and reactive to our new normal and kind of the expectations that employees have, then they risk losing a competitive advantage, and people are going to jump ship and go to the next guy who is going to accommodate that.
Absolutely, you're right. I'm thinking of the people who are not able to work from home because they don't have, that's just not who they are. So they don't have any productivity while they're at home. Okay. I would be okay with letting, if they're saying, I'm not coming back to work because I'm productive at home, and they're not able to work that way, go to the computer, have a good time.
Right.
But
yeah, and I was thinking about, whenever I'm asking the question, I'm thinking about some businesses I've dealt with that technically you could work from home, but it hinders workflow. It's more difficult, and yes, it can be done, and they're doing it right now, but not as efficiently as if they were all in the same building. So can you and should you sometimes are two different things. Like the one thing I'm thinking of is, off the top of my head, is a law firm. They all can work from home right now, but there's a lot more difficulty in doing that. And some law firms you can absolutely work remotely. It depends what type of law you're doing and what the files, and if you need to be sitting with clients and everything like that. But like, I think there's going to be some, like, there's gray area, right? There's going to be some people who absolutely could work from home, but it's not necessarily as efficient as if they were in the office.
And hopefully what people are figuring out is the practice to make it more efficient. You know, we've been home for a while now. So hopefully the first week was probably a write-off. The first couple of weeks were a write-off. But maybe now they're starting to get into that practice of, okay, how can we make this work? How can we figure out how people can sign documents? And it's funny, the law firms have been an essential service. I think a lot of them have been open, but the lawyers are working from home, but their staff are working at the office. They're still required to go in. So
in my experience, it's been like they just have enough people in there to like answer the phones, and you know what I mean? Like, it's bare bones so that they have somebody there, but it's the same as the accounting firms. Like, they would have the people to answer the phones and whatever, but it's not necessarily all of them.
Oh, that's good. That's good. I've heard some of the other side, but it's mixed, right? So I'm glad to hear that. But you know, as time goes on, we've been practicing how to work from home, how to share documents. You know, one of my clients that I worked with this a few years ago, they didn't save anything on a common drive. Everything was saved to their desktop machine. And so I started to get them at least on Google Drive, right? Like, we got to share some of this stuff. Who owns this? And there were different versions. So we're practicing. So I do hope that there's going to be lots of people who do have the flexibility to work from home, but I think it's got to be determined on a case-by-case basis and monitored.
So I've been following Dr. Heather Morrison and the updates and everything else, especially around the Renew PEI, because I really miss going for hikes. So I was very excited when those things opened up this weekend. But one of the things that is constantly in the back of my head with this return to work is, you know, we are still in a state of emergency. I know PEI has been very lucky. We only have 25 cases. We only have 2 that are still active and they're isolating. You know, we've been very fortunate because of what Dr. Heather Morrison has done. However, if we return to the office and somebody has allergy, I can have really bad allergies, especially this time of year. Knock on wood, so far I've been lucky. However, how do you really identify, you know, those things? I mean, I know I've been fortunate enough to maintain my job. I've been able to work from home, but, you know, going into the office with allergies and telling people it's allergies, and people, you know, oh, it might be, but it might not be, because we have this stereotype in our head. We have this fear now in our head. So trying to find that balance between, you know, allergies, a cold, what could be COVID-19, what might not be COVID-19. I know we're really lucky on PEI, but we still have a potential that this may get worse before it gets better. And we don't know which way this is going to go. So what would be the best approach to a situation like that? It's like, okay, we're back to work, we're back in the office. Oh, you're sneezing, you're coughing, you need to work from home for the next couple of days. Well, my allergies can last 3 or 4 weeks. And how do we ensure that somebody's not maybe using that just to work from home? So is there a way to balance this out? Is it a case-by-case basis? Is it, you know, going to the doctor and getting a note saying, no, this is just allergies, she can go to work, but when really you don't? I know this is a lot of uncertainty, and I'm throwing a lot of what ifs out there, but we share a small office where I work. There is, you know, 9 of us. And that's something that's been rolling around my head is when I go back to work, I know I suffer from allergies. And as much as I enjoy working from home because it's easy, and I really love being able to get up and make my lunch and not have to pack my lunch before, it's one of the greatest things in the world. I know I'm going to run into that. Yeah. Come May, June, I know my allergies are going to start working up. And as much as I don't mind working from home, I am really missing that social aspect of talking to my staff without having to call them or email them to bump ideas. So, and I mean, there's nothing really in the return to work policy about this. So what's your idea?
So there is, in that template, actually, there is illness exclusion policy. So, how do you monitor people for COVID-19? What are some of the things? And I would say straight up, when you go back, let everybody know I have allergies. This is what they look like. These are the symptoms I exhibit when my allergies are worked up. But now you had said, what if people take advantage of that? So it's a little different perspective. And I would say,
I'm not saying I would. I'm just saying some people might be with the CERB. And it's just, how do you navigate that without putting yourself in legal jeopardy with the work board?
Yeah. So if somebody is going to say that they might have COVID-19 and you suspect that they have allergies and that's all it is, if they want to work from home that badly. But on the other hand, if they're sick with COVID-19, they're using sick leave. Just because you're home doesn't mean that you're not using sick leave. I think people should still be using sick leave if you're not feeling well and it's impacting you cognitively. Maybe the best thing for you to do is just go to bed. Get the rest so that you can rejuvenate your body. So it's been funny because people have asked, well, what about vacation for people? What about sick leave? Nobody's going to be taking that. I'm like, well, they should be. Who doesn't need a couple days off from thinking about all this stuff? Who doesn't need a couple days away from the stress? You might still be choosing to sign in and check your email or whatever. But, people should be looking at, how can I do long weekends? How can I take time off? Right now, there's a lot of things that have slowed down. So how do you make sure that you're taking your own mental health breaks? Or if you're sick, just be sick. Just stay home, which you're doing anyway. But tune out, because your brain also takes energy to function. It's a huge energy consumer. So if you're not well, be not well and take a sick day. If you need a long weekend to just pull away from work, I would encourage staff to do that. I would encourage them in whatever way they need to take care of themselves, because this is going to be, we're going to have waves of this, right? Somebody said it's like crocodile teeth, and there'll be another wave. And we'll all have to go. One thing that's going to be hard is then sending people home again. Like, no, lock yourselves up again. It's the middle of summer. Yeah, too bad. But it's going to happen again. So we also need to let employees know this is going to happen again. How do we deal with it the next time it happens? And if it's not COVID-19, it'll be something else. It's, the world has changed and the environment has changed us too. Yeah, Carrie?
I'm going to chime in with another sort of perhaps not thought about concept that I think should be considered on the HR side. A lot of jobs are being done differently. So the circumstances have necessitated changes in the way that things get done. And so I think it's important that employers remember that. So of course, one of my angles is ergonomics. And so I'm just really mindful that you have to be thinking about this. So if you've changed the way a job is done, you want to make sure that it's being done safely. So as an example, if you have a company, if you have some sort of manual handling task and people are handling things, and you're now telling people they have to wear gloves where they didn't used to have to wear gloves, for example, wearing gloves potentially changes, your tactile feel, and potentially, depending on what gloves you're wearing and what task you're doing, the grip strength and the effort. And so you're potentially exposing someone to risk of injury, by introducing a new way of doing things. Or maybe in places where you used to have 3 people doing something, but now you've only got 1 person doing something, then that 1 person is potentially getting overworked, or they're lifting more than is safe, or they're lifting more often than is safe. So just another thing I think that people need to think about.
I never would have thought of the tactile and the strength then used. I would not have thought of that. That's so interesting.
Yeah. So, and like I've seen, well, I don't get out and about much, but even some places I saw the staff wearing those, like, those like sandwich, the loose plasticky sandwich gloves, and they're using that in their workplace to do a task. Well, you can't get a good grip. So whatever you're doing, you gotta squeeze harder. And so then you're just, all your carpal tunnels and your tendinitises and all of that stuff becomes a risk. So yeah, there's lots of things to think about.
Yeah. Now I'm like, what else? I'm thinking now.
Even so, the wearing of masks, for example, again, depending on, and there's the health. So I think some or maybe using them without providing the training about the need, to take them off or to wash them, this and the other, and the kind of the bacterial risk. But even the fact, or when we have these physical barriers, or we're standing further away, so the person is further away from us and on the other side of a plastic barrier, and someone's wearing a mask, and so there's potentially the need to project your voice more. So there's even the risk to sort of your vocal cords, because you have to articulate and project your voice more. So, and I've also seen, you're further away, so you can't see as well. So then there's the potential risk. I could go on all day, but of sort of, you're straining your neck forward to try and see something. Well, stretch that out over the course of hours and days, and now you've got neck stuff, you've got headaches.
Yeah. Oh, those are really good. Well, I love my laptop prop. And it's funny. For some stuff I do, I look for images to put on my website or put on posts or whatever, and I look up working from home, and it's all these people. I don't know if I'm side profile, but they're looking down at these laptops on their table, and I'm just, no, I don't want to have that picture. But there's so many things that we can't. It's not just this short-term thing where you can just sit in bed and use your laptop on your lap. The repetitive strain is going to be huge, and that will impact our use of benefits, health benefits. Might be medications, could be massage therapy, occupational therapy, could be more time off or sick leave because of these strains and things, and stress added with that. It's just a real perfect storm for a lot of absences and a lot of lower productivity. Yeah. And I see we are way over the half-hour mark. It's supposed to be a half hour, right, Erin and Rachel?
I'm really okay with this going longer.
So I do have another call I have to be on in 7 minutes. I'm good for 6 more minutes, and I'm sure you guys can carry on, because I think it would be great for Carrie to just share her information, because now I'm thinking.
I will say that, like you say, people working from home and their poor posture and whichever, for your ergonomics, I feel like the majority of people also working in offices are just as bad. Like, I don't know that it's a working from home issue, because any office you go into, it's the same. It's just the laptop sitting on the desk. I mean, you guys at the startup zone are great. But the majority of the time, the offices are just as guilty as the home offices.
It's almost like now it's just this awakening. It's an awakening for us to notice things, because there's a change, like even an awakening to talk about mental wellness, to talk about, what does it look like for working from home? Well, now we need separate monitors, or we need laptop stands and separate, or maybe we need to look at how we can put things online. Like, all this stuff should have been done before, but it's the change that's giving us the opportunity to look at things differently. But you're absolutely right, Angela.
Yeah, I've talked to a couple people who it's like, we've been trying to enable these VPNs to work from home for 3 years, and we just never got around to it, and now we did it in 2 days.
Amazing, right? Yeah.
So, Wendy, if people want to get in touch with you after this webinar, what's a good way for them to do that?
Email is perfect. So wendy@resolvehr.ca. You can find that on my website, which is resolvehr.ca. And I also have posted a bunch of articles or little things that I've done up to say on my website on the resources page that's just saying these are some things with COVID-19. So I've called any resources, any articles on that site, on that page rather, I have pandemic HR at the beginning. So that's specifically talking about what's been happening in the last month plus. But there's also the business adaptation advice fund that businesses can access HR resources through, or financial planning with Angela, or consulting for ergonomics with Carrie. And there's all kinds of different businesses out there that are, we're all, in a way, we're chomping at the bit to get some business going too, which I'm sure everybody can recognize. We're all in that same boat as well, whether employees or business owners. But it's also a really good way. Like I know some people are using it to get some financial advice, to give them peace of mind. Like that's worth way more than $2,500. Is to have peace of mind. So what does that look like? Do you need peace of mind about the financials? What programs you can access? How to change up your mortgages or whatever it may be? Or do you need to get some help on how to deal with your employees, or how you're going to reintroduce people safely into the workplace? Or maybe it's pivoting your business to be more online. So the business adaptation program, oh my gosh, it's a great little economy stimulator. But take advantage of it. You don't have to pay it back. It's easy to get. Just go get it. So that's a really good one to take advantage of. But yeah, I'm doing another talk for the PEI Business Women's Association on Friday. Their coffee corner, they posted on their Facebook site. And I've got another session coming up. I think it's the 28th. Maybe UPEI is doing a series of calls, webinar things, 4 sessions. 2 have already been done. There's 2 left bi-weekly. They've got it posted under their professional development and continuing education website, Facebook. So I'm going to be doing another one of those toward the end of the month. Yeah, but I did. Oh, go ahead, Tracy Lynn.
Sorry, those would be posted on your webpage to find out, or your website for those upcoming webinars, or no?
So the ones that I'm doing, I have actually reposted on my website. So they're on the landing page. When you go to Resolve HR, the landing page, if you just scroll down just a little bit, I have upcoming workshops. So the information on how they're all being hosted by other people now. But they're on my website if you want to take a peek at those. The Startup Zone is fantastic at posting different events coming up. They're probably the best organization at sharing that information. Yeah. So I've got 1 more minute. Any questions for me? But again, I'm sure you can carry on. Lots of information, people with lots of information on this call. Okay.
Thanks, Wendy.
You're welcome. And get to see you all. It's kind of neat because you get to see everybody all at the same time. And somebody I was just talking to, we were laughing because it's like everybody stares at you so intently. Because you don't know which person they're looking at, but you feel like you're always on and you're always watching people. So it can be a bit exhausting if you're an introvert too. So it's new normal is a funny one. Anyway, I'm signing out, but email me, call me, Slack me, whatever. It's good to know what's going on and connect with people.
Awesome. Thanks, Wendy.
Thanks.
Peace out.
Thank you,
Bye.
Wendy.
Thank you, Wendy.